I'm going to repeat that to myself.
Yeah. Is anyone going to die right here? Yeah. Me, my
Yeah.
anxiety is like pushing through my chest.
But
you know?
nobody's going to die. So
Mhm.
let's start there and work back from there.
Nice.
You know?
And I have to tell you and again, this is not just about Emmanuel, but my team works with that team. So you're as wonderful, or I wouldn't have been with you all these years myself,
Mhm.
Or
but
you wouldn't be here right now.
Exactly. You wouldn't be here right now. Exactly. But one of the things that I do love about him and the personality of what he brings to the table for us is, the way our team is sort of put together. I may be working with an older client or a boomer client, and Mary may be working with somebody who's younger. He's reviewed leases for the girls, and he can really fit himself into whatever demographic we're working with. And that's sometimes hard to do, because you know what I mean? Sometimes like with the younger people, you want to look like the cool guy.
Yeah.
And he is,
He's so much cooler than people actually think he is until they meet him and they're like, wow.
Yeah, you are.
You're
so cool.
awesome.
Yeah, he is. He is.
I can't wait to share this with him.
Okay, so we just gave Emmanuel like a nice video testimonial.
Exactly. Exactly. Feel free to share that. We'll let you know how to use that.
We will.
So tonight we're going to be talking about 1031 exchanges. And if you have any questions for us, we are live on WATD tonight. So you can get in touch with Ben and he will sort of sneak you through to our in-home studio here in Pembroke Center. And the phone number is 781-837-4900. Dustin, do you want to start with, the main ideas and thoughts here for Mark?
Yeah, no, certainly. And it's, anytime we have a specialist on, it's always best to start with the basics. And sometimes that's even for us, sometimes it's not, but we're going to cover everything here. And so we're talking about 1031 exchanges. Mark, can you tell us what it is and the reason why someone would pursue it?
Yeah, so it's thrown around a lot, and I think a lot of people don't really truly understand what it is and what it means and why it exists. And what 1031 actually stands for, it's the Internal Revenue Code. It's a section within the Internal Revenue Code. So it's a tax provision in our federal document for the IRS. And what it says is you can trade, in essence, exchange, right? It's a 1031 exchange. You can exchange one real estate property for another, so long as you, in essence, buy something nicer, right? So it has to be equivalent in price or more. So what most people use a 1031 exchange for is, if they're a real estate investor and maybe they own a 2-family, maybe they first bought it and they lived in half and rented out half as a strategy to mitigate the monthly obligation. And then they move out, they find another home, a single family home somewhere. And then they turn that 2-family and they rent both of them. And then they continue to rent those as a small business, right? Because these landlords are small business owners. They have customers, the tenants, who are paying them rent, and then they pay down their mortgage with it. It's really good strategy, great small business. Ask any landlord who's been in the game for more than 10 years, and they'll tell you it's an amazing way to create wealth. But another way to do that is to then take that 2-family and maximize it, right? So you have a 2-family, you've been renting it to 2 different tenants, and you decide you want a 4-family or a 6-family, or there's a deal on a 12-unit apartment or a mixed use asset downtown, or a strip mall, or some other real estate asset. You can actually take the sale proceeds of that first asset, that 2-family that has been so good to you, you lived in it and then you rented it out and you've paid down the mortgage and you have this massive amount of cash, but you would be taxed on that in most circumstances at the point you sell it. Mm-hmm. And when you sell it, you would be asked to pay a significant amount of taxes. But if you want to stay in the real estate game and you want to transfer, exchange, trade up, if you will, you can buy another real estate asset for the price or more than what you're selling. And you, in essence, get a tax-free loan from the government, because where you would be required to pay the tax at the point of sale, you're actually deferring that payment. You're not getting rid of it. You're not forgiving it. The tax isn't going away, but you're kicking it down the street until you sell that next property. So in essence, you take that 2-family, you buy, let's say, a 6-family, you use all of your proceeds without paying the tax due, which would be due upon that sale in any other situation, but you move all of it to the new property, and you're able to build a bigger portfolio should you want to do that. And you can provide more housing stock. So if you think about it, this is a true win-win-win. It's a win for the investor who wants to stay as a landlord. They enjoy this business. They enjoy having people in their homes and paying rent and providing housing and delivering a good product, a good service for these people. It's a win for the tenants, right? Because there's more available housing. And it's a win for the IRS because there's more available housing, right? This is a huge need in our country. And they're actually encouraging good landlords to stay in the game. Use our money, don't pay the tax on it yet. Use this money, pay it back when you're ready. And when you're ready is when you sell. But you can continue to do that until you've created a very big real estate portfolio where you're serving a lot of needs for the government and for the citizens of the government. It's a great product.
And I know that there are a lot of stipulations, which we'll get into, regarding how much time you have when you sell one before you have to purchase another one. One of my questions is, does it have to be housing? I thought that one time I heard something like, I don't know, was somebody using something like with farm animals or something? No?
It has to be real property. It has to be
It has to be
real
real
estate.
property.
So it doesn't have to be housing. You could certainly take that 2-family, convert it to a 4-family, enjoy being a tenant, but then realize that there's an opportunity to buy industrial warehouses near the intersection of 2 interstate highways so that you could be an Amazon distribution center. You could buy that. That's a piece of real estate. And as long as it is real property, real estate, and it's at or above the sale price, then if done correctly, and it's obviously very complicated, you need what's called a qualified intermediary to handle the money. So it's not, the government doesn't trust you to take the proceeds from the sale of your property and then move them to another. There's a fiduciary who's in between the 2 transactions and controls all of it and does all of the proper filing to make sure that the IRS can see that the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed.
Where do you get that person? Like, I've never even heard about that person.
So QIs, right? Qualified intermediaries are they're in business to be qualified intermediaries. So you could Google it, but most often they're either attorneys, accountants. A tax attorney is a good one. But banks, some of the community banks have departments that do it. And most of the title insurance companies have a department to do it. But, you could ask us if anyone ever was looking to do one. We have great relationships with QIs.
Sorry, Dustin, I promised you I would let you handle this, but I have questions.
No, so do I. Do not worry about it.
So one of my questions is, if you have, let's just say you have a 2-family and it's in Massachusetts and you want to sell that 2-family, but you wanted to buy maybe another property, does it have to still be in Massachusetts, or can you cross state lines?
Well, we don't want you to leave Massachusetts, but if you do, you can. So it's a federal guideline. So you have jurisdiction within the entire United States. You could buy in Florida. You could sell your investment in Massachusetts and buy an investment in Florida. The key is that it has to be for business or trade use. It has to be an investment. You can't sell your 2-family and then buy a second home or a beach house in Florida.
What if you rent it? If you bought it for renting purposes?
If it's an investment, then, and the intent is to use it as an investment, then yeah, you can. But if your intent is to have that as your primary home or even a secondary home for that matter, it won't pass muster, and they will find you and you will pay the tax.
Okay. So, I mean, that's really at the end of the day, that's what you would have to just do is pay the tax. But I mean, if you were really, I mean, at the beginning stages of maybe getting a second home, I would say, I know a lot of people who have condos, and we know a lot of, there's one agent that I'm thinking of, he has 2 condos down in Marco Island. I actually reached out to him recently, and I know that, it's used for rental, but he'll go down there himself for a week. So could you do it, like go down there a couple times a year?
I certainly wouldn't go into it with that intention. There are exceptions. It's very complicated, but you could go down to make repairs. You could go down and manage the property, but the ratio of time that you spend versus rent it's not intended for that. And when it's not intended for that, you're just looking for problems with the IRS.
All
And
right.
we recommend not
Yeah.
finding problems.
No,
with the
no one
IRS.
ever wants to get in trouble with the IRS.
No.
That is for sure.
No, the rules are the rules, and just
Yeah.
play by the rules. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it could be one of those things for, at some point you could maybe put it in an LLC. And then at some point, if you did want to make it your primary residence, you know what I mean? If just like if you're in a 2-family, you know what I mean? And you wanted to convert it to 1 or whatever, then you
Yep.
could just buy it back from the LLC.
You could, and if you think about it from the estate planning, financial planning perspective, you could certainly do that, but with the intent that it was going to be an investment property in the beginning. So you start out with the intent, and there's unwritten case, rules with case decisions that, the intent is to rent it for 2 years. So
Yeah.
after 3 years of having a condo, you decide you want to spend time in it. The tax would only be due should you sell that, right?
Yeah.
So say you go there, you use it, you rent it out for 3 years, and then you use it for 3 years and you go to sell it, then there's a much different tax obligation than if you sold it as an investment, right? Because now you've used it as a primary residence. So there's an additional tax that's going to be due. But I do want to point out what we like to refer to as swap till you drop. So when you talk about, McNamara money and financial advice, you can actually continue to do these 1031 exchanges. You start with that 2-family where you lived in it, right? And you rented the other half, and then it became a rental. It became a 4, it became a 6, 16. Then you had a 144 unit, property, or, you have a huge portfolio based on what you've done, and you're kicking off enough income from that you never have to sell those properties, and then you die, you would actually pass those on to your heirs back to the stepped up in basis. So what you've kicked down the street for all those years would in fact go away upon your death. So there is a financial estate planning tool also associated with the 1031 exchange.
Okay. And just so you know, like, I'm thinking of all these great ideas. Maybe I could do something like that. But Mark, in case you don't know, Dustin is now the fiance of my daughter, Casey.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So they got engaged in October. So yeah, maybe somebody with bigger plans to buy more and more and more can think about that. But I would just want to retire
Just
myself.
Start now.
Yeah.
Start now. Dustin, start buying real estate now.
Buy.
Buy. Don't stop buying.
One of the other questions I had was in regard to, and then I promise I'm going to let everybody else have their turn to ask questions, in regard to the taxes that we're talking about and the impact of selling a commercial property or an investment property and then not buying something else, let's say. Are those taxes different than if you were selling your primary residence? And is it that same equation of, a single person versus a married person, any gain over 500, or is it just tell me what it is?
Just give me the answer.
Yeah.
So let me just qualify a small print. I am not a tax attorney. I am not a CPA. I am someone who's seen and handled a number of real estate transactions along with 1031 exchanges. I've actually conducted a 1031 exchange for myself. So speaking from experience, what I've noticed is that most investors don't realize the impact of the tax that they're about to pay when they sell their investment property. So if you're talking to somebody who is maybe in their 30s or 40s and they've had an investment property and they just say, you know what, I don't really like doing this anymore, or I don't like this property. Well, they've probably already factored in the amount that they paid for the property versus the amount that they're going to sell it for. Net real estate commission, they think, well, you know, I heard tax capital gains is around 25%, Fed's 20 plus another 5 to mass. So they do the math, but what they always forget is the depreciation. So over the course of time, from the point they bought the property, they more than likely have been depreciating the property at a relatively aggressive level that has to pay, you have to pay that back. You have to pay that depreciation back at a certain percentage. And what I've seen with people who come to us to sell it, and I say, are you sure you want to get out of the landlord business? Because, you know, I highly encourage you to talk to your accountant and figure out exactly how much your taxable obligation is going to be, because I bet it's more than what you think it's going to be. Have you heard about a 1031 exchange? Is it really that you don't want to be a landlord, or you don't want to be a landlord at this property? Because there are options for you to defer that tax if you want to continue to stay. And we encourage real estate professionals like yourselves to talk about that with people who are looking to sell their properties, because more often than not, they're not aware of how much tax obligation that they have and that they're looking at. And it is very different than the primary residence. The primary residence in Massachusetts, again, we're only talking about Massachusetts when it comes to that. But as long as, you know, you're a married couple and you lived in that property 2 of the last 5 years, then there's a first $500,000 in gain is not taxable. $250,000 if you're not a married person. And, you know, as much appreciation as people are having, there's, you know, not many people have that level of appreciation when they're selling their house. Otherwise, they have some other capital expenditures that they can offset that with, so that the tax very rarely is due when you're selling your primary residence. Very rarely, unless people have been in their home for a very long period of time or had a massive amount of appreciation for some unknown reason, would have to pay tax selling their primary residence. Everybody who's selling their, you know, investment property is going to pay a tax because it's not their primary residence. And, you know, depending on how long they've had it will be based on what tax rate, right? If it's under a year, then it's their ordinary income. Whatever they're taxed at on their income would be what would be due if they sold the property within a year, which is why people who flip properties tend to pay, you know, a lot of taxes on their gains. So people after a year, they're paying the capital gains, the long-term capital gains. But what people never remember is they got to pay back the depreciation component to it. And it's always a huge sticker shock. So I try to teach the real estate professionals in our continuing education classes to talk about that up front, so that, you know, it's not that phone call after closing, like, oh my God, I had to pay money to sell this house at the end of the day, or
that's scary. I mean, that's honestly, like, I'm thinking about that right now. It's like how, you know, I think that would be a good class, or a good, you know, to have somebody on here to figure out how much taxes it would be when you go to sell it.
Absolutely.
I do have a question though. So is there an opportunity within this where you could maybe purchase land and build something that could possibly be greater than what you sold it for?
So there's 2 other types of 1031 exchanges that are available, and they're much more rare. So most people think of a 1031 exchange, they say, okay, I'm going to sell this property. I'm going to identify 3 properties that I would potentially want to buy. I have 45 days to do that. I know, Sharon, you talked about timelines a little bit. I have 45 days to identify those 3 properties, and then I have the balance of 6 months to close on one of those 3. So I pick 3, I close on one. I have 6 months from the point I sell to the point I purchase, 180 days technically. Now, what if I sell my property for $800,000, but I want to buy this beat up house for $400,000? But if I put $500,000 into it, it's going to be worth $1.5 million, right? So I'm selling for 8, I'm buying for 4. You would think that wouldn't work, but you could do what's called an improvement 1031 exchange. So you would actually have, and not to get too complicated into the weeds of this, but the 1031 exchange qualified intermediary would technically take title to that property, that $400,000 property. And then they would administer and disperse the funds that you receive from your $800,000 sale until you've exceeded that. And then they'll convert the title back over to you. So a little complicated. You can also do a reverse. So if there's a scenario where, you know, that strip mall you've always had your eye on is going into foreclosure and you have to buy it in a week, you could actually buy it with your cash or with a bank that would be willing to lend in a really, really unique situation like this. There's very few banks that would lend you the money to buy that, would then give you 6 months to sell. So it would be the opposite of a normal 1031 exchange. So they'd give you 6 months to sell the one you want to sell, fund that, reverse it, and take title to it. So I know that went a little bit beyond, you know, where the conversation wanted to, but there's a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of opportunities out there for people who want to own real estate.
Mm-hmm. I am so glad that I didn't buy. Remember at the last place we were, and the landlord was selling it, and he asked me if
Buy the unit.
if I wanted to buy the strip mall, and I was like, I'm all set. So glad I did that with the way that commercial is. But I'm sure, I mean, that could be something that we're going to see a whole lot more of commercial properties on the market, right?
We are. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
We just have a comment on Facebook. So Jasmine Glasgow is listening to us. She's from Maritime Mortgage. She said, such a great point. A lot of people think it has to be apples to apples. I just had a client swap a 3-family for 2 beach rentals in Florida.
Yeah.
So they're using them as investments, which
Great.
yeah, that's awesome. So I could do that if I wanted to, so long as I'm not staying in them. I'll stay at the hotel. I have a lot of points now because I haven't been able to go anywhere. So, all right. Did you have a question? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just one quick question I had, because I kept hearing you saying you're kicking it down the line and like basically deferring the taxes as you purchase additional investment properties. So what happens if like I have to sell all of my investment properties? Am I paying the taxes on every single investment property that I've kind of deferred and kicked down the road, or is it?
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting.
Really?
So you're, like you said, you're not deferring, you're not actually just, I guess, taking over a new tax amount.
It all kind of, it'll continue to build. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So what if you're doing more like for like if or a little bit better, but let's say you're selling a $500,000 2-family and you purchased a $525,000 2-family. So is it the differential, or you're doing the taxes at the end on both separately?
So you're deferring, right? So you're just moving one tax obligation to the next. It's almost like
you could end up in a negative, couldn't you?
That's why he's saying hold and die.
You know, that's one strategy, is the swap till you drop. But hopefully, you know, you're buying in a way that you're generating a lot of income over the periods of time as well, and you're getting the benefit of that capital, right? That's capital that you wouldn't otherwise have the benefit. And think about it. 0 interest rate, right? You're borrowing what you would have had to pay that day at closing. So you can actually buy more and not have to borrow more. Right?
Yep. Do we have another question on Facebook? No. Okay. I thought that we did. And you know, one of the things that you said earlier is that there is such a need for apartments right now too. So I think that it's sad. I actually had a client who called me earlier who's like looking for someplace, you know. So it's good, I guess, if people are buying, like we saw somebody who recently purchased a big house and they wanted to make it a multifamily and things like that. I don't know if they'll ever be able to do that, but we definitely need more of that. And then I just actually got on the committee for the Affordable Housing Committee in Pembroke. So I'm really looking forward to that, because I really do think that we just need more affordable housing.
Oh, 100%.
Sorry. Yeah. All right.
So you need investors who are willing to develop and support those affordable housing properties, right?
Yeah.
So you want to help incentivize them and give them give them as much help as they can get so that you, government, can help all of the people that need the affordable housing. It's a partnership. It's basically a public-private partnership by having the government defer the taxes so that you can use that capital to profit.
Yeah. Dustin, what was next on our list of questions? Or do you ladies have a question?
Before this next one, if we could just slightly regress and maybe fill in some people who aren't exactly sure, 100% what we're talking about. Mark, can you just explain what?
I'm not sure what we're talking about anymore.
No, I mean, our listeners are all over the place, but just what are capital gains?
So capital gains is the difference between your basis, right? The point you bought the property at to the point you sell it. So there's a delta. Hopefully you're selling it for significantly more than you bought it for, right? This all goes out the window and is completely unnecessary if you're selling it for less than what you bought it for, right? You have a loss there. But that delta can be adjusted by depreciation, right? So when your basis price, you bought it for $250, as you depreciate that basis can go down from $250, which takes you further away from your sale price, right? So you're creating a bigger tax obligation. One way for the basis to go up towards that as opposed to down is to do capital expenditures. So if you were to do a new roof, or you're to do new siding, or redo all the kitchens, this and that cost, that amount expended, goes against the basis. So you're $250, and I put excuse me, I put 50 into kitchens and baths. Now my basis is $300. So if I sell that for $400, the delta, the difference between the two is not $250 to $400, but it's $300 to $400. So you're only looking at the $100,000, not taking depreciation into consideration, but your basis is the combination of purchase price, what capital expenditures, what improvements did you make to it, versus what you have depreciated against it. And then the sale price is where it all falls in. So bought it for $250, put in $50,000 in kitchen and baths, you're at $300, but then you depreciated it by 20, so you're at a 280 basis. You have a $500,000 sale price. The difference between the 280 and the 500 is what you're exposed to for taxes. Now, call it $80,000, call it $100,000, whatever. I'm not an accountant, right? We already went over that. But you can, instead of paying that $100,000 to the IRS, you take those proceeds and you reinvest them into real estate. And the government lets you do that, and you don't have to pay that, call it $100,000 right then and there. But at some point in time, unless you die, you'll have to pay that tax.
We only have, I think, less than 10 minutes left in the show, but we do have a comment from Susan Solis. She's a full-time realtor here at Boston Connect Real Estate. She says that South Shore Habitat builds affordable housing, and she also wants to congratulate Sharon for joining the Pembroke Affordable Housing Trust.
Oh, well, thank you, Susan. Susan is great. She's wonderful, and she's on a lot of committees and things herself. And I know that she recently did something. Maybe that was some other thing she was on. Sorry about that. But, as we're sitting here thinking, I was like, should have we sold the multifamily in order to buy this building? Because at the end of the day, I'm really now buying property for Casey and Mackenzie.
I mean, swap till you drop.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this one is good. I mean, this will always.
No, now you can sell the 2-family
Yeah.
and buy another investment property.
Yeah.
Buy a 3-family.
Okay. I'll work
Four
on
family.
that. I'll work on that.
Okay,
I want to
thanks.
rest a little bit.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mary.
I got it down. I got the 1031 exchange. That's where I'm going.
Yeah. So I waited for this question until as we're gearing down here, and before we wrap it all up in a nice little package and you give a synopsis of what we talked about tonight, what do you think the new administration is going to do with some tax deferrals and things like that? Do you think that there'll be changes and adjustments in that?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I have heard what they've said. I've heard, leading up to the election and some of their hopes. One of them was to increase the capital gains tax.
Mhm.
So if we're looking at a 20% federal right now, they were looking at increasing that.
And that's
Um,
for both commercial, well, investment property and
Yeah,
primary.
it's capital gains. So it could be
Okay.
stocks, bonds, any capital gain that you have. They were looking to increase that. And it obviously it takes, the full body of Congress to make these sweeping changes. They were going to eliminate or increase the estate tax. So there would be a tax associated with that. But they have talked about eliminating the 1031 exchange, which would be a shame because it is beneficial to the government and to the citizens of the government, not just the capitalistic real estate investors who are providing housing for these folks. So they have talked about it. I mean, I hope they don't. It's been around for a very long time and it's worked. So it would be a shame to see it go.
I just wonder too, is if, they think about, the scale down here where we are, or are they thinking about larger scales, like, whoever owns the Empire State Building and buying, this, you know what I mean?
An
Like,
island.
yeah, an island, whatever, just so long as it's better than the Empire State Building. But you know what I mean? Like, I wonder if that's where their mindset is versus, how we're looking at it sort of on a hyper local level of, a 2-family or 3-family, just to give people apartments.
I mean, it's if they, the folks in private equity in Wall Street who are buying portfolios of hotels and office buildings, they're using the same regulations that the person who has the 2 families buying the 4-family. So,
Mhm.
In fairness and equity, if they're going to eliminate it, it's up and down the food chain.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right. Well, did anybody else have any questions before we
That was
ask?
my big one.
That
I
was
learned
it?
a lot. I took
I
a
did
lot of
too.
notes.
Yeah, we scrupulous notes.
I have
How
a
about-
question.
Yeah.
Dustin, how's the South End doing? How's the city dealing with this? And are we seeing some price fluctuations going on? Are we starting to see people fleeing the city? Or are they starting to come back? Or what's the deal there?
It's quiet. It's really quiet. It's interesting because the perception of like everyone's leaving this. It's not a mad rush to get out of here. It's still Boston. It's still obviously a sought out neighborhood, but it's getting a little more average. You're seeing prices dropping a little bit, things that are on the market a little longer, buyers with a little more power. But again, in the grand scheme of things, the sellers are still in control.
Mhm.
Things are
What
still
was
going up.
the absorption rate statistic that you gave us a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, I mean, almost, polar opposite of the South Shore, where the last 4 or 5 years has been up close to 100%, maybe in the 90s, 70s. And again, don't hold me to this, but now it's maybe down 25, 30,
Mhm.
not too high off what, the national average would be. So and I guess that's the thing. It's as close as it will ever be to being a buyer's market. But given the circumstances, I just doubt it ever gets there.
In
Yeah.
the city, in the condo market, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he did condo market South End. He did this 2 weeks ago, and I think the absorption rate was, I think he said it was like 97%
Yeah.
this time last year. Nothing on the market, and then it dropped down to 26%. Same time frame that he was
Mhm.
looking at when he was doing his absorption rate. So, and I know visiting, you see the signs popping up all over
Yeah.
the place, but I haven't really seen the prices drop too much out there, though. And I think that that's
No.
because the people who were flocking there paid so much to be there a couple of years
Mhm.
ago. And now they have to keep those prices high.
Yeah, and my guess is a lot of the people who can afford to buy here can afford to be elsewhere without selling immediately. They do not need a home sale contingency, and they have, I guess, the right to be a little more stingy with how they want to, make adjustments to the price or what they're asking for.
Yep. So we have a couple minutes left here. And how about, Mark, if you could sort of wrap up, all of our final thoughts for our final seconds here, and then make sure we have enough time to give your number and how people can get in touch with you in your awesome office. And again, I am not kidding you. I really can't thank you enough for one, the kindness and friendship that you and all of your attorneys and your staff give towards Boston Connect Real Estate, because it makes our teams here feel a lot more secure and like a benefit to our clients. When we introduce our clients to you, I know they're in good hands. So thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate your trust and loyalty to our team for as many years as we've been working together. It's very important, communication is ideal, and, like-mindedness, and, let's not fight, let's be proactive, let's figure things out. To wrap up, 1031 exchanges are a great tool for a real estate investor who wants to continue in the real estate business. And hopefully it's here to stay for a long period of time, but you definitely need a team around you, real estate professionals like Boston Connect, obviously, real estate attorneys, but you're going to need the assistance of your CPA, your tax consultant, right? I'm not a tax attorney. You heard me stumbling through some of the taxy stuff in this, but also your financial advisor is so very important in these scenarios. I mean, you are a business owner. If you're a real estate owner, you are running a business, and with that, you need the professional advice of all of these various professionals. For us, Sharon, thank you for having me on the show, and thank you for allowing us to plug our team. We really enjoy working together and taking care of people in their life-changing moments, but we can always be reached at our phone at 781-319-1900. And we encourage folks to go to our YouTube page, where we have over 100 videos that talk about various things that your listeners and your clients would need to hear about, including, I just sent Dustin an old one from a couple of years ago on 1031 exchanges. Would you be surprised? We did a quick video on those. So on YouTube at Stiles Law, really easy to find. And we're always looking for new content. If anyone has questions or they want something, we'll be happy to put it together.
Perfect. Thank you. And you can get in touch with us at bostonconnect.com. And I think that's the end. We'll see you. Bye, Mark. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. It was a
Bye.
pleasure.
Sorry to keep you guys tight, but that was perfectly done.
Okay. Thank you, Ben.
To do.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mark. That was good.
Thank
Well,
you.
Have a good night, everybody.